Hey everyone, welcome back to the Void. Again. I have come back here to talk about my top 25 favorite albums of 2023. I was going to post this on my second channel, Mute on Music, but spoiler alert for those who enjoyed that channel's dead. So instead, I'm going to be posting that video on here. Considering how many views the long-form videos have on that channel, this video will probably get a bit more attention here. Before we start, I should probably state that most of my music taste leans within the rock, pop, and alternative scene, I guess. It branches out a little bit occasionally into like stuff like metal and sometimes hip-hop. There's not any hip-hop on this list, unfortunately, this year, but sometimes it does. I am a bit of a music nerd, so just be prepared to see some weird shit on here. Just saying. And if you don't see one of your favorite albums of the year on here, I did put some honorable mentions in the description as well. So without further ado, let's start off with number 25. At number 25, I have Home Is Where with their album The Wailer. This album is within the genre of folk punk, which I had no idea was even a thing before I listened to this album, but surprisingly it actually works pretty well. There are also some elements of post-hardcore and emo in here, and they actually make a pretty interesting record. There are some moments on here that feel a little too long and kind of boring, but overall this project is a pretty fierce and fun record that has a pretty unique sound. At number 24, I have Olivia Rodrigo with their second album, Guts. I think this is a general improvement over her last album, Sour. I think Sour had the higher highs, but I think Guts is just a more consistent record overall. While there are a couple of duds within the tracklist, I think the overall scope of the album is very well executed. I think that if Olivia does continue down the path that she's currently going down, I think that she could really become one of the greatest songwriters of this generation, but while I do think this project is pretty great overall, she's not there quite yet, but still, this is a fun project. Up next, I have Slow Dive with their new album, Everything Is Alive. I'll admit that while I haven't heard the 2017 self-titled record, this is a pretty big change in sound from what they're known for. And while I do prefer what they did in the 90s, this is still a pretty cool project from the band. They go for more of an electronic and ambient sound, and it's a pretty interesting route for the band to go into. And just like everything else that I've heard from Slow Dive, this is a beautiful record. I just think it's great that a band like Slow Dive is back again and making music this late in their career. Alright, up next I have Renee Rapp with their debut album, Snow Angel. This is probably going to be the most controversial pick on this entire list, especially considering that I just put this above Slow Dive. Especially considering this is a pop record from a theater kid. But I like this record a lot more than I thought I would, and it's stuck with me since its release. This is kind of in the same ballpark as the Olivia record, but I think it has a few more highlights in that album, especially the title track and how grandiose it is. This record is also a bit overdramatic at points too, but I think that adds to the charm of it. I can definitely see why this wouldn't be everyone's cup of tea, but I enjoyed it. Sue me. This is why I don't leave the... Up next I have Paramore with their new album, This Is Why. I'm gonna go ahead and get this out of the way real quick. C'est comme ça, f***ing sucks. As for the rest of this album though, it's a pretty good time. The band go for more of a dance punk sound, and it works on them pretty much perfectly. And it's a pretty consistent record overall too, considering how the sound shifts into a more down-tempo sound in the second half. However, my biggest problem with this album, minus that one song, it's definitely the mixing. Most of the tracks sound pretty decent here, but with the track The News, for as heavy as the track is, it feels really flat. I don't know why. I guarantee it's much better in a live setting, but I don't know. It just doesn't really work within the studio setting for me. But overall, while it's not my favorite Paramore record, it's still a pretty great addition to their discography.
It's like a psychedelic switch.
Alright, up next I have The Loveliest Time from Carly Rae Jepsen. I'll admit that I don't have much to say about this album because I just listened to it for the first time 2 days ago. But what I will say though is that this is a really fun pop record that absolutely smokes everything on her last record, the Loneliest Time. I'm not usually someone that dives deep into pop music, but this was just an undeniably fun record that I couldn't not put on the list. Up next I have Lana Del Rey with Did You Know That There's a Tunnel Under Ocean Boulevard. This is my first Lana record, and this is just a really beautiful record. There are a ton of beautiful ballads on this record about relationships and her perception. And I pretty much have to shout out the track A&W for its large build up into the trap-inspired section. This record definitely isn't perfect though, with the final 3 tracks feeling completely disconnected from the rest of the record. Plus you have the 2 interlude tracks that pretty much add nothing as well. But pretty much everything else here is great within its own right, and I hope to see Lana continue down this path in the future. At number 18, I have Black Country New Road with Live at Bush Hall. This is kind of cheating a little bit considering that this is a live record, but this record is entirely composed of brand new songs, so I'm going to count it here. This record calmed the fears surrounding the band after the departure of Isaac Wood last year, and pretty much confirms that this band is still very capable of writing excellent songs. This album is definitely more within the chamber pop sound than they were beforehand, and while there are some fantastic short songs on here, the longer multi-phase songs are some of the best. So yeah, it's safe to say that Black Country New Road are still killing it. At number 17, I have Shame with Food for Worms. Shame came about around the same time as the aforementioned Black Country New Road, and I've always felt kind of indifferent to them. They certainly have a unique sound to them, but up until recently, I just haven't felt interested in listening to them. But with Food for Worms, it feels a little more melodic than what I'm used to hearing from them, but there are still plenty of heavy and punky moments on here too. I've never been the biggest fan of Charlie Steen's vocals either, but I think they work the best on this record too. So yeah, I'm pretty excited to see where Shame go from here because this was an excellent record. Up next, I have Sigur Rós with Auda. This is also their 8th record and their first album in almost 10 years. And while they're mainly known within the post-rock field, this is much more of a modern classical and ambient record. And let me tell you, this album is just beautiful. It can get a little samey towards the second half of the record, but my god, this is just like the perfect album to sleep to as well. And this is just a mesmerizing listen, and I'm just glad that I started getting into this band right before this album came out. I can definitely understand why some people were disappointed by this record, but this really did blow me away. Alright, we are now in the top 15, and we are starting with Tim Hecker's No Highs. Once again, this is my first Tim Hecker record, and I am just beyond impressed with what he laid down here. I think I referred to this as the perfect soundtrack to a futuristic noir film in my short review. And yeah, that fits this album perfectly. I also really enjoyed the horn contributions from Colin Stetson. So overall, if you want an engrossing ambient record, definitely check out No Highs. Up next, I have Foo Fighters with But Here We Are. I will go ahead and say that most of this album is carried by the second half, with the shoegazy Show Me How, the amazing ballad and Beyond Me, the 10-minute monster in The Teacher, and the devastating Rest. This second half of the record is pretty much perfect for me, but I'm not going to knock this first half though, because it's not bad either. The first half is much more of a return to form for the band, and while I don't love everything here, it's still a good time. And obviously, rest in peace Taylor Hawkins and Virginia Grohl.
It's a bad idea.
Up next I have boygenius with The Record. I don't know why I did that. I finally started diving into Julian Baker, Phoebe Bridgers, and Lucy Dacus' music this year, and it's been great going down their discographies. And The Record pretty much amplifies everything that makes all 3 of them great musicians. There are plenty of upbeat tracks as well as heart-crushing slower moments too, and I pretty much enjoy every single song on here for the most part. So if you're a fan of indie rock in any sort of way, definitely check out this album.
Like pressure.
Up next, I have Model Actress with their debut album, Dog's Body. This album is definitely not for everyone, as it's a post-industrial record with some sexual themes. Most of the tracks here are pretty upbeat and noisy, but most of my favorite tracks here are some of these slower moments, like Sleepless and Sudden. And while it's not the most original debut on the planet, it's still a very impressive record. Speaking of not for everyone, up next I have Swans with The Beggar. I've only recently started to get into Swans' work, but what I can say is that this is definitely one of the slowest Swans albums to date. This record has frontman Michael G. Rao look at his own mortality and the possibility of his own death. It also has him look at his own alcoholism and how it led him to this point. And I can't talk about this record without at least mentioning the almost 45-minute long song, The Beggar Lover 3, which is pretty much a collage of a bunch of songs from the past couple of Swans records that make a massive experience. And for as long as the song is, it kept me engaged throughout, and it didn't feel It felt long, but it didn't feel that long. So if you're willing to sit through 2 hours of this kind of stuff, I highly recommend it. Oh my god. Up next I have Sprain with The Lamb as Effigy. This was the second and now final album from Sprain, considering how they broke up about a month after the release of this record. This is definitely the least accessible record off this entire list because the album is all over the place, but that's exactly what it went for. There are some songs out here that will blow your speakers up and some that will keep you patiently waiting for exactly the same thing. It is a shame that Sprain broke up right after this record released, but considering how massive this record is, I can kind of understand why. So if you're into bands like Swans or even the Chat Pile record from last year, trust me, you'll eat this shit up. At number 9, I have Mitski with The Land is Inhospitable and So Are We. And once again, this was my first Mitski record, and it pretty much proved to me why Mitski is so praised in the first place. For as simple as many of the songs are on here, they still feel very grand for what they give off. This is definitely one of the best folk albums of the year, and it pretty much proves to me why I need to go back and listen to Mitski's work. Up next is Hell Mode by Jeff Rosenstock, which pretty much proves to me that pop punk isn't as dead in the water as people like Machine Gun Kelly make it seem like it is, because pretty much every single moment on this record is infinitely enjoyable. Surprisingly, once again, some of the best moments on here are some of the slower moments like Heal Mode and Graveyard Song. But without a doubt, the crowning moment on this record is the 7-minute closing track, 3 Summers. So if you enjoy early Green Day and Weezer, you will love the hell out of this record. I guarantee it. At number 7, I have Jane Remover with Census Designated. As far as I'm aware, this is a pretty big departure from her debut album Frailty, with that being much more of a bedroom pop album and this one being a shoegazy, noise rock, and post-rock album. It's kind of hard to define, and while I do understand why some people were disappointed with this record, this shit was right up my alley. Some of the best songs from the year come from this record, namely the title track, Video, and Idling Somewhere, which all were pretty long, dense, and noisy songs that work perfectly with what they give off. There are a couple of moments that go on for a little bit too long, but the highlights absolutely make up for them. I'm just really interested in seeing where Jane goes from here because she is like right around the same age as me, which makes me beyond jealous of her talent. Up next I have After the Magic by Parannoul, which is magical. This is once again within the shoegaze and post-rock field, and I think this is a massive improvement on what Parannoul did on his last record. If you want a perfect description of what this album sounds like, just look at the album cover. Just look at it. It just sounds like a warm blanket during an extremely cold night. There are a lot of explosive moments on this record, but a lot of tender ones as well. And while I don't understand anything that Parannoul is saying on this record, I can absolutely see what he was going for. Alright, top 5 time. Top 5. Up next, I have King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard with their album Petrodragonic Apocalypse. I'm not going to say the full name, it's way too fucking long. To put it simply, this is an environmental progressive thrash metal record about an apocalyptic future where there are supercell storms, witches, Gila monsters, and dragons. It sounds stupid, but the music is damn great. I finally went through King Gizzard's entire discography this year, and I can wholeheartedly say this is one of their best records to date. My only piece of advice with this record, though, is to not play this in public because, as Brad Taste in Music said, this is the kind of music that would get you shoved in a locker. Yeah. At number 4, I have Caroline Polachek with Desire, I Want to Turn Into You. I'm going to start by saying this is the pop album of the year. I don't care if you have someone else in mind. No. This is the pop album of the year. Plus you have some elements of flamenco pop, synth pop, and even trip hop. When I was going through various airports for my vacation last month, I listened to this thing probably like 7 times in a row, and I never got sick of it. So please, if you're going to check out one album from this list, please let it be this one. At number 3, I have Squid with O Monolith. Out of every record on this list, this one by far grew on me the most. Just to put things in perspective, I originally gave this thing a 7.5 out of 10, and now it's a 9. And I think the reason for that is because this album is much deeper than what the cover entails. And I don't mean deeper as in we live in a society. I mean deeper in sense of scope. I mean, you have songs on this record that poke at the little anxieties in everyday life. Also, quick note, track 5, The Blades. It's my song of the year. That track just increasingly becomes heavier and heavier as the time goes on and ends off with a haunting acoustic outro. So while I don't think this album is completely perfect, this is one of my favorite albums to come out of this decade so far. By far. At number 2, I have Geese. Geese! With their album 3D Country. Geese are increasingly becoming one of my favorite bands currently active right now because 3D Country is one of the most damn fun albums to come out this year and just feels stupid but great at the same time. They combine elements of indie rock, southern rock, and obviously country. And they combine these elements to create one of the most fun albums of the year. This is just one of those albums that you don't have to take seriously at all and you can still enjoy thoroughly. And if you enjoyed this record, check out the 4D Country EP as well, because those songs are just as good as this album. So be sure to look out for these guys because they have a very bright future ahead of them. And at number 1, I have Sufjan Stevens with Javelin. I only recently started to get into Sufjan's work. In fact, the first album I heard from his was Illinois, and I heard that literally a week before this album came out. And for those who aren't already familiar with the situation around this album, Sufjan lost his partner, Evans Richardson, earlier this year. And as tragic as an event as that is, he managed to turn that into a beautiful piece of art. The lyricism on this record is some of the most heartbreaking I've ever heard, but the instrumentals, the backing vocals, just, oh my god. Everything about this record is beyond beautiful. I don't have much time left to record because my camera's about to die. But to put it simply, this album just shows that as dark as something can be, you don't have to treat it that way either. So yeah, those are my top 25 favorite albums of 2023. Hope you all enjoyed the list. I know this is very different from my normal content, but if you stuck around to the end, thank you a lot for watching. I had a ton of fun this year making all these videos, and as stupid as they may be, I'm proud of every single one of them. So yeah, that's about it for this video. So thank you all for watching once again, and I'll see you next year. Take care.